Hey guys, thanks for clicking through. I'm going to walk you through a really fun mixed media project for this colorful elephant. A lot of fun to do. Involves different types of art supplies and also very colorful when you're finished. And also an opportunity to do 3 or 4 of them and like frame them together of different colors and have a really nice art piece for your home. Okay, so let's go over the supplies that we're going to need to do this, because I'm going to show you how to do this project in 3 or 4 different ways. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to use mixed media paper, which is a pretty accessible paper that's better than regular paper for watercolor and the like. So this is just taped down onto a board to prevent it from buckling and warping. Okay, so mixed media paper, very important. You're going to need a pencil. You're also going to need an eraser. And then for the sake of contrast, black line like a Sharpie. And then there's going to be 3 different ways today to go about adding the color. Number 1 is just going to be your traditional watercolor set. Also, we're going to give you some information about using watercolor pencils, as well as some really fun information about something that you may not know about, which is these washable markers that you probably have, turning them into a watercolor set. So lots of good information for this fun project today. And I'm really eager to get this started. So once again, regarding the paper, don't use regular paper for this, regular copy paper or drawing paper. What you want is a mixed media paper or a watercolor paper, either the lower, like 70-pound weight, or the 140, the heavier weight. This project today is really good for either mixed media paper or watercolor paper only. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with our blank paper here. Okay. So placing the paper here in front of us, we're going to use a pencil, and we're going to sketch a line from the right-hand side. Sketch really super lightly. It comes over just like a bump, and then we're going to put an oval here. Once we have our oval, we're going to come down from the left part of the oval. We're going to make the trunk curve like this. Okay, so bump over, oval shape, curved shape, like a backwards J. Okay, now what this does is it starts out kind of small and it doubles back and gets wider as you go for the trunk. Okay, now this elephant is not super realistic. It's more of an abstract or a cartoony elephant, so we're just going to put like an oval shape here. And then once we have that in place, we're going to put kind of this shape here. This is like an Asian elephant with the smaller ears. If you wanted to make an African elephant, then the ear would be much bigger. Okay, and then we're just going to put a little oval there for the eye of the elephant. Okay, so that's the shoulder and the head of the elephant. What we're going to do now is we're going to come down from about where this line was here. It's going to come down, and this is going to be a big thick foot of the elephant and some of the belly like that. Okay, so pretty simple to go ahead and sketch this out. We would have like a little pupil in the eye, and then some elephant toes, right? They have their big kind of toenails on their feet. So I just used 3 ovals there. So this is the sketch portion of the project, just using pencil onto mixed media paper. Okay, so go ahead and do that. If you need to pause the video, you can pause the video and make sure that you have all of these lines down on the paper. Now, one final step for the sketch portion is to erase the line inside the ear here. This puts the ear on top of the head and body, and then to connect the trunk to the head shape with just erasing this line out right here. Okay. So that is the completely finished sketch portion of the project today. Pretty quick and pretty fun, right? Okay, so what we're gonna do is when you're ready, we're gonna go ahead and grab a Sharpie and we're going to trace over these lines. Okay, so really basic tracing over of the lines. Okay, so elephants are gray, so even if your Sharpie isn't the best, this is going to look really good. When you get to the trunk, if you want to add a little more of a point to it, and you can kind of build in the cheek like that. Okay, so that's kind of how you handle the tusk, and then you can do the eye however you like. You can shade that in a little bit, and then do the ear. Okay, so there is the head and the trunk, and then we're going to come down and just do our final lines here for the leg and the foot. Okay, so that is our black line, our Sharpie over the pencil. If you want to, you can use an eraser to take out the pencil lines. I mean, this is going to be painted basically with watercolor today, so this step isn't super necessary, but if you're a neat freak and you enjoy cleanliness of line and project here as you layer through this, if you want to go through and erase all of that, you can do that. Okay, so go ahead and pause this video if you need more time for your Sharpie or your erasing. Okay. Okay, now that we have our black line done with the Sharpie, we're going to go through and use oil pastels. I've chosen 3 colors, 2 brighter colors or 2 colorful colors, and then one sort of what I'm calling an elephant color. So this is where you invoke a little bit of strategy. You want to figure out like what color scheme you want to do. So for the designs on the elephant, as well as the lines for the skin of the elephant, some of these would be lines that would be wrinkles in the elephant's skin. Maybe these are part of the design of the elephant. So here there's like warm colors with yellow and orange with an orange background that work really nice with the gray of the elephant. Some other samples are this one, which I think we're going to do sort of right now, which is sort of a maroon color with orange, and then either a white or a gray color for the elephant with the yellow background. This is yellow and green on the elephant with an orange background. What else do we have here? A couple other samples. This is pink and red with blue and pink for the background. So just kind of think about your colors and figure out how you want to do it. This is yellow and orange again, the gray of the elephant with the green background. Okay, so you have to kind of think of, you know, how you want your colors to be and what colors you want to use together. Once we finish this project, you'll have the opportunity of maybe putting 3 of these in a frame together. I don't know if you can even see that on the on the video, but if you wanted to frame like 3 colors together, it's a really cool piece for the house that looks like maybe it came from India or Vietnam or something. So think about your colors, and I'm going to show you how to do this now with not only watercolor, but with also watercolor pencil, as well as a washable marker, okay? So the first thing we're going to do on our elephant is we're going to make a little rounded shape there. And oil pastels are great because we're going to create a resist with the watercolor. So the oil pastels are going to have a really nice effect with the watercolor. So I'm just going to make a design on the forehead of the elephant. And this can be anything. They have celebrations and different times, I think, in Asia when they will paint the elephants. So that's what this is supposed to represent, is the painting on the elephant. So this is just sort of random lines and such with one color first, and then coming through and doing another color amongst what you have. So totally random. You can think it out and plan it out if you'd like, or you can just kind of have fun and go with the flow and see what you create. Okay, so that is the designs on the elephant in 2 colors. Can you use 3? Sure. Could you just use 1? Could you use more than 3? Absolutely. Just maybe play around with it first on some smaller paper and then decide how you want to do it. I've done this, as you can see, many times, so I like the 2 colors for the painting of the elephant, and then I'm going to use this gray oil pastel, and what we're going to do is we're going to create lines around the eye of the elephant like so. 3 or 4 lines. You can kind of decide what you think looks best. We're going to put sort of a contour line on the ear, and then we're going to bring some lines onto the trunk that might represent wrinkles, okay? And then a knee, same type of thing that we did on the eye, and it's just here, sort of the knee of the elephant. So this is the oil pastel work. I'm using 3 colors, and you can do what you like. I have a couple other samples here for the different techniques I'm going to be using. This is pink and red with blue for the elephant. And this is yellow and orange. And then, I don't know if you can even barely see it, but this was done in white. The oil pastel for the elephant lines was done in white, and those will really only reveal themselves once we paint the elephant, okay? So let's go through now and talk about the final step for this. And by the way, as I mentioned before, this is a mixed media project. We've used pencil and Sharpie and oil pastel now, and now we're going to use some watercolor techniques, okay? So the way that this works, and I'm going to try to teach 3 different color methods for here. The way that this works is we're going to be using gray, obviously, for the elephant. So I'm going to show you watercolor pencil first. And I am going to find a gray. Probably should have set these out in advance, but that would have been too perfect in terms of planning, right? So anyway, I have a gray here. And the gray is, let me drop some while I'm at it. The gray is just going to come in and fill in around. This is with watercolor pencil. Don't use regular colored pencil. it has to be watercolor pencil because those are designed to work with water. So watercolor pencil, I'm just coming in wherever there's a negative space here on the elephant around the designs and such. And I'm shading in. It doesn't have to be perfect because the watercolor, the water brushing technique that we're going to use on top of this is going to blend these scritchy, scratchy lines together. Obviously, the more you color it in, the darker it gets. This is an example of just using the watercolor pencil for those people that enjoy it. I really love watercolor pencil because I can color as I normally would with a colored pencil, probably my favorite way to color. And it's just very comfortable and familiar for me, okay? So I'm coming in here and I'm just coloring, shading in. You can see that I'm not super concerned about perfection, just putting the color down, okay, in all of these areas, okay? So that is with watercolor pencil, okay? Then we would also choose, for the sake of what we're doing here, our background color. Bright colors are the best for this. I haven't done this yet. I'm going to use a light blue. So I'm just going to come through now with my second watercolor pencil. Make sure I'm not going off the paper there. And I'm just going to drop this color in, okay? Now, the beauty of watercolor, as I mentioned before, is you don't have to color perfectly. Obviously, the more scritchy, scratchy, you might have a little more effort in terms of hydrating this and water brushing over it. But you can see that I'm just dropping color in and try just a light blue around it here, okay? So that's, could certainly take more time if you wanted. And you can even drop in different colors too. If you're feeling like you want to really maybe play around with this a little bit, this is all going to blend together. So if you want to throw some purple or some pink here and there, why not? Just drop it in. There's a theory that, you know, the more colors, the better. So that's how you would color it with watercolor pencil, and I will show you how to brush that here in a moment. But that's an example of watercolor pencil. Now, what some of you may not know is that if you have a set of these washable markers at home, you actually also have a watercolor set, okay? So I'm going to come in here, and again, it doesn't have to be perfectly colored. You can just drop this. This washable marker isn't even very good, but great way to utilize the ones that maybe are running out of ink or what have you, is use them for this watercolor technique, okay? So I'm dropping some gray in here and there to the elephant with the washable marker. And then maybe for this one, what color do I want? Let me do some yellow. And again, this is an example of another washable marker that maybe has seen better days. So instead of throwing it out, maybe you set those aside and they become your watercolor markers. So just adding the color all the way around, here and there. Again, scritchy scratchy doesn't matter because the water is going to blend it. Okay, now again, maybe we want to just add a little extra color in here. So maybe we just throw some little spaces of color in here so that that can blend together. You'll see how that looks. In my opinion, the more color, the better. Okay, so that is washable marker. Okay, now, what's probably more familiar for you is just straight up watercolor, okay? So for those of you that have not done watercolor before, the way that watercolor works is you have to load the colors. You don't like dig into the watercolor. You don't scoop it out. You basically just load your color with water, and now you have the color, okay? So that's how this works for those of you that are less familiar with watercolor. What I need, because this set doesn't have a gray, is for the sake of what's going on here, I've got to make a gray, okay? So I'm gonna load some black. This set does have black and white, and guess what? Black and white make gray. Okay, so I'm gonna load my white, I'm gonna load my black, and I'm just going to touch into this black just a little bit, and look what I have now, a nice gray, okay? So that's how you make gray if you have access to both black and white. If you don't have access to black and white, you likely have access to black, so just you're gonna make your gray with black and water, okay? Lots of water, just a little bit of black, just like we did here, okay? So this is where the reveal is gonna come in. I've loaded my brush with watercolor, and I'm gonna paint right over the oil pastel. And what we're gonna do here is we're gonna see this resist. So the water will not, oil and water don't mix, right? That famous saying. We're not gonna see the, paint mix with the oil pastel. Now, because I made my gray in a certain way that ran out pretty quickly, I have a darker gray now, so what do? I just add water and kind of let it all become one gray as much as possible, okay? So we're gonna let this just kind of paint this gray all around and fill in the elephant with the gray. And realistically, the lights and the darks make it more interesting in my opinion. So on this one, it's supposed to look kind of like folk art or abstract a little bit. So a lot of these idiosyncrasies that will happen with the watercolor are good. I like them, okay? And I'm just gonna let this watercolor be the watercolor instead of worrying about perfection. If you ever get to a point where you have something that's just too wet, you can always dry your brush out and sort of use it as an eraser a little bit, or just thirsty brush and kind of soak it up. Spread it around, okay? So this is my watercolor, straight up watercolor, okay? And I'm gonna thirsty brush this a little bit and just spread that around just a bit, okay? So look how cute this elephant is, and the oil pastel resists. Now this was done in gray, so there's not a ton of contrast, but that was one of the things that I wanted to show you. You think about your colors and you decide, do you want more or less contrast? These will dry differently and look differently based on the decisions that you make. Okay, so this is the straight up watercolor, and I'm gonna set this aside right now to let that dry a little bit, and I'm gonna bring in the watercolor pencil, okay? Now again, this was done super scratchy, so we're gonna watch this blend now. So I'm gonna start with the gray, and I'm just gonna really hydrate, very, very wet brush. And the idea is to go over all of this gray, and as much as you possibly can, make the lines blend. Make the scratchy go away, okay? Now, the more water you do, the more blending will take place, okay? So don't be afraid to kind of slap water all over this and just let it hydrate the watercolor pencil and make your gray, okay? The more you go over it, the more you lightly brush over it with the water, the more the gray will blend and become a nice, still have some lines maybe, but it becomes a nice gray for your elephant. You can see the difference in the darkness or the tone as well. It's a lighter gray with this one. Could have pressed harder, but for the sake of contrast and just trying to show you how this works, okay? So that is the elephant. And then again, lots of water, and this is where you can kind of see some fun happen here, because now we're gonna let this pink and blue kind of play together. And I purposely chose kind of a beginner brush. I don't have a fancy watercolor brush right now, just to show you that when you're doing this type of stuff, like, you know, as long as you have a soft brush, any brush will do. So I'm just kind of letting this all come together and blend as much as possible. The more water you use, it's a little more messy, but it's fun. And the more the colors will kind of blend together too. And then you'll see when they dry, it has a nice subtle color effect to it, okay? So let's go down here and just finish this one off. This is a straight up watercolor pencil on mixed media paper, which is a pretty, you know, pretty common approach to creating art, mixed media. This is where you let go a little bit of the control. The watercolor pencil gives you the ability to control how you're coloring a little bit. And then here you loosen up on the control because the water's gonna do what the water's gonna do, right? And it's gonna come through and it's gonna make these colors blend, okay? So this is an example of a very light watercolor pencil. You could certainly, you know, darken it up, and that gives you a good idea of how that will look. The more you kind of lightly scratch over these lines, the more they should sort of blend and go away, okay? So that's watercolor pencil. Really, really fun. A little more subtle color if you like that. Or if you press harder when you're doing the colored pencils, it can be darker, okay? So we're gonna set this one aside for now and let that one dry a little bit. And now this here, turn that over. This here is what you may not have realized, which was your watercolor, your washable marker, okay? So same exact scenario, just coming in and hydrating these. Because it's washable marker, guess what? It plays with water well. So this will turn that marker into more watercolor just by water brushing over it, okay? So great extra usage for your markers, either, you know, as you're using them for other projects, or as I mentioned before, if they're running out and you want to set them aside, you can turn your sort of older markers into your watercolor set, okay? So this is hydrating all of this and finishing up on the trunk. So we had done the oil pastel work here in the elephant in white, and you can kind of see where that resist is now taking place, creating kind of a subtle, sort of a subtle detailing. Okay, now on the background, similar to the watercolor pencil, only maybe a little bit more vibrant from the get-go, just because you don't have as much control regarding pressure for these types of markers. But the more you sort of wash over these with your brush, the more you can create this watercolor effect. And it's a go-to for me here in the studio because we're always constantly using markers. They're running out. They become our watercolor markers. And we're doing so much art here in the studio that, and I want to teach kids about mixed media. I want to teach them, you know, how to use, you know, watercolor and watercolor pencils and such. And sometimes kids are afraid of painting. Not always, but sometimes. So this can be a good kind of example for them to follow. Now again, if you have places in here where the watercolor is starting to blend in, maybe where you don't want it as much, you can always thirsty brush that up. Okay, use your brush almost like an eraser a little bit. But kind of the cool thing, this is kind of looking cool where the yellow's coming in. I'm sort of liking it. I have no problem surrendering to watercolor. I really kind of let it do what it wants to do. Okay, so this is an example of 3 different ways to create this project, and which looks best to you. Which do you want to try? Which looks like fun? This is our washable marker. This was our watercolor pencil. I would have hit that again with the wet brush. And then we also have our straight up watercolor, okay? Which we need to put our background color on now. It's more dry, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead, and I had hydrated yellow. I'm just gonna go ahead and use yellow. And I'm just gonna really kind of let the yellow do its thing. And I'm gonna encourage it to not only fill the background, but also potentially by adding water, just kind of do its watercolor thing. So I like splotchiness, I like variables. To me, it adds texture, which I like. So we're just going around and letting the watercolor do what watercolor does. Splotchy, blendy. And this is with a less precise brush. Folk art, indigenous art style, less technical. You can see how this, by just using water, and then by also revisiting the paint, you have darks and lights. And it's gonna dry really super cool, okay? So that's an example of the straight up watercolor. You can see the very subtle gray lines from the oil pastel on that one versus another subtle look, which is the white versus something a little more contrasty like the blue. Okay, so when everything dries, you'll have something along the lines of these that I showed you before. The yellow, and you can see the darks and the lights in there. This one's even more so with the darks and the lights. So maybe that's distracting to you. I don't know. Just things to notice and decide. I kind of like the texture, the patterns that are created. Here's kind of in between. A little bit splotchy, but a little bit not so splotchy, right? Here's an orange with a lot of texture. Okay, so these are just really fun elephants that you can draw and ink quickly, and then use your oil pastels and your watercolor technique to do the resist, and just make a bunch of these. Do 3, 5, 6 of them, and then see which ones you like the best. As I said before, these are great if you mount or frame them together, because elephants will sometimes walk in unison. I think that's what it's sort of reminding me of. I don't know if you can see that, but something along the lines of that-ish. And I think that's a really cool art piece for your home. So thanks for walking through this with me. I would love to see your art. So if you want to post it in the comments, or if you want to send it to us via social media, we'd always love to see what you're creating. Please remember to subscribe and thumbs up us, 5-star, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. We hope that you are having fun being creative, and we'll come back and choose another one of our videos soon to help you with your creative journey, okay? So have a great day, and thanks again for stopping by.